Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our second day of talks and our first session on exploring aspects of material culture. And I'll hand you all off to our first speaker.
It's a little bit too early for that. Okay. Here? No, I mean this basically is a full screen. Yeah, right? Perfect. So does it check? Yes. Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. Before I start, I would like to say thank you for the organizers for the opportunity to present my current research and also for the quiet decision to supply us with the coffee before we start. So I guess now everybody is more or less awoken and can follow the presentation. My presentation, my current research project is a broader framework of place IDN research project from which you will hear a lot today, and it's about Egyptian blue. So since Egyptian blue is kind of different materials from what we have heard already in this forum, I would like to briefly introduce it just to make sure that we are on the same page. Egyptian blue is the first artificially produced inorganic pigment, and each word in this definition is meaning. But why but? Why studying Egyptian blue? What makes it special? Well, there are several answers to that. First of all, Egyptian blue, in my opinion, was a kind of conceptual improvement, because if you think about the artistic materials of the period, and Egyptian blue was introduced as early as the 14th century BCE, most of the naturally mineral pigments were made of minerals, and the minerals already have some color, which makes it more or less obvious that you can make a pigment out. But in case of Egyptian blue is made of a mixture of lime, silica, and copper with the presence of alkali flux. Neither of those ingredients are blue. So you take something which is not blue, you process it, and you obtain something which is quite trivial for our today understanding for the contemporary chemistry, but for ancient artists, I think it was a huge leap forward. Secondly, Egyptian blue production process is quite elaborate. It's a product of pyrochemical process, which required a certain set of knowledge, including very tight temperature control. And as we know from studying other high temperature industries like glass, for example, or metals, we know that it's not the most difficult part is not to achieve the high temperature. It is to maintain it, and to maintain it in a certain range, which is extremely important for Egyptian blue, because if you overheat it, it will just turn black if you heat it over 1100, I think. And if you not reach the desired temperature, the synthesis will not seem to happen. And also, Egyptian blue is one of the rare occasions when we have the recipe of ancient material survived in literary sources. We have the recipe provided by Vitruvius, which, of course, naturally sparked some interest among the Renaissance painters and among early scholars. So Egyptian blue has been studied since quite a long time ago. I think the first investigations were carried out as early as 1815. And last but not the least, Egyptian blue became a really big part of ancient artistic palette. It was very widespread. It was used for over 2 millennia. And just to give you an example of the scope, like last month I attended the conference about the ancient polychromy, and there were several dozens of presentations, and in which of these presentations they mentioned the Egyptian blue. So they found Egyptian blue in every sculpture, in every painting, in every fresco, is everywhere. So naturally, we are interested in that material, and we want to learn more about its properties, about how it was made, about how it existed not only as a material but also as a commodity. On this slide, I put for you just at different angles that you can take looking on Egyptian. And now briefly we will talk about the production of Egyptian blue, and this is somewhat oversimplified model of the production. Of course, it can be more detailed, but here I would like to draw your attention to the last line, where we try to establish how different stages of the production process can be reflected in archaeological materials. Because from the laboratory reproductions, from material science studies, we can understand, okay, what's necessary to do it, right? But we also should understand which parts of this process we can actually trace archaeologically, because not everything survives. And here, what you have the question mark, that means that this is hypothetical. We can probably find it somewhere in the future, but we don't have it right now. And coming back to what I said before, because about why studying Egyptian blue. Egyptian blue is pretty interesting material because it simultaneously, on one hand, you have very strict physical and chemical restrictions on the process, as I said before, in the temperature, and you cannot go beyond. Beyond those restrictions, you will not have a successful product. But at the same time, within those constraints, there are plenty of room to maneuver for ancient craftsmen, and they could choose different paths to achieve the good results. And understanding their technological choices can help us to understand their technological knowledge in the way, how did they manage the resources? How did they identify the obstacles that they had? How did they try to overcome these obstacles, and so on and so forth. Just to give you a little example, for example, about the variability of the Egyptian blue and this room to maneuver I mentioned. For example, in case of the raw materials, they can be quite different. You need always silica, but it can come from crushed pebbles, it can come from sand. You need calcium carbonate, which can come from limestone, or it can come from crushed shells, and it can be added separately as a separate ingredient, or it can be added together with the sand, how it was described. With the flux, it can be plant ash, it can be mineral natron, and with the copper phase, you have given a wider range of opportunities, because it can be copper minerals, copper alloys, bronze alloys, many different things. To illustrate the variability I'm talking about here, for example, here you see a ternary diagram that shows how changing just one variable, in this case it's a batch composition, the ratio between different ingredients, how it can change the outcome. So you can see here that you can achieve pretty different colors, from the dark purple to very, very diluted greenish turquoise, something like that. So yeah, and this is, I stress it, is just one variable. It's only the batch composition, but there are also time, choose of the raw materials, and many other things. So, in my opinion, from this slide and from the previous slide, what kind of conclusions can you make? Two conclusions. The first conclusion is that, as you have seen, it's quite an elaborate and multi-stage process, right? But at the same time, the archaeological evidence is pretty scarce. We have many question marks here, and we don't know many things. Which brings us to the next issue, the localization of production sites and how the Egyptian blue industry, let's call it, was organized, because it's a striking contrast between how many finished Egyptian blue objects or paintings containing Egyptian blue or other things we know, and the actual amount of knowledge about the production sites. We know just several of them. And if you look at the map, you can observe a gap that there are no production sites in the Iron Age. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, this part of the work was performed by me and my scientific supervisor, Professor Attila Herrera, in collaboration with Alexandra Roder and Cecilia Brons. And what we tried to address is that we have very little archaeological record for the Egyptian blue production. And therefore, it's even more important to ensure the correct interpretation of these materials. And there are several noticeable tendencies. For example, when an archaeologist discovers Egyptian blue cakes on the site he's excavating, and of course, I'm an archaeologist myself, I can understand it. He has a temptation, right, of claiming that okay, it was produced here inside Rome, which usually not the case. So we should understand how the industry and distribution was organized, and to provide archaeologists with some help on how to distinguish different things. So we proposed a model. It's quite similar to the model that already established for the glass production. It includes two principal contexts with the primary production sites, which produce, well, you can read from the slide. The primary production sites, they produced the crude, the raw Egyptian blue, and then it was processed in processing workshops, not necessarily with additional thermal treatment. Usually they were just grounded to use a pigment, but sometimes not only that. So yeah, and we also proposed a set of criteria to distinguish between those two contexts, between primary production sites and secondary processing workshops. So this paper is currently in press, and if you're interested, let me know. I can provide you with some more info on that. So, but coming back to the name of my title, the archaeological evidence, what kind of materials does survive archaeology? Well, what comes to mind is two main categories: the, as I call it, raw Egyptian blue cakes and pellets, and crucibles. We'll talk about crucibles slightly later. Now, right now, I'd like to address a little bit about these Egyptian blue cakes or crucibles. As you can see from this slide, there are most abundant shapes for these kind of materials. And you can see the shifting of, how to say, not developing traditions, but you can see different approaches the ancient craftsmen took. For example, on A and B, there are from the late Bronze Age, and they're quite large. Usually it's large rectangular blocks like on B, or it's bowl-shaped cakes, as it's called, on A. The shape of those cakes derive from the crucible they were produced in. And as I said, they were quite huge. For example, on C, you have the ingot from Aksakil, from Iron Age site in Turkey, which looks quite strange because you probably cannot imagine a vessel, crucible of that shape. So it's quite unclear, and it's much smaller. And on D, you see a typical spherical Egyptian bowl, which is very small. It's just like 2-3 centimeters in diameter. That's a new tradition that developed in Hellenistic and Roman times. It's quite unclear why it was introduced. My wild guess would be that it has something to with the time of the firing, because probably if you make such smaller balls, the production procedure takes less time, but that's just speculation, and this will also probably be part of my PhD thesis. But there are also more interesting things because on E you can see a pellet from Naucratis, and it's the earliest spherical, this like ball-looking pellet, but at the same time it's not spherical. It has the top and bottom flattened, so that also can provide some insight into production of such things if they were stacked on top of each other. And on F, you can see even more interesting thing. It's also from the late Bronze Age, but this find that it shows us some insight and into the production and why in my chain of prototype table I mentioned the secondary firing process, because as you can see, how do you get this F stuff? You take A and B, you ground it as a powder, you put it into bag, and then you refire it to achieve finer texture and lighter color of blue. And in this case, you can see this sac-shaped piece. It retains not only the shape of the bag, but also it has the cloth, the linear impressions on it that gives us the idea that the secondary firing was a thing. So yeah, and that was the first category. And the second category is my favorite because it's crucibles, and my PhD project will be focusing mostly on the crucibles. So like the other high temperature products like glass or metals, Egyptian blue required the crucibles for the production. The role of the crucibles, however, is very poorly understood. It hasn't been studied much, and then we are trying to fill this gap right now. So why these crucibles were the way they were? Was it just a vessel to hold the molten phase during the firing, or was the crucible designed in a way to participate in the reaction process? Well, okay, sorry. Okay, so basically, I wanted to intrigue you, but I very quickly say that, yeah, we have some hints to the second option because, for example, we have these crucibles from Cartier, who are very different from the other ceramic types they have at the site. It's from Egypt. Usually they have the iron-rich Nile slit clay, which is very big red, and this is calcareous clay, which is completely different, lime-rich, and it's associated only exclusively with Egyptian production. So we should investigate why they went such distances to produce this particular type of crucibles. In the case of Candir, we don't have the full shapes. We can guess from the ingots parts, but we don't have shapes. But we have, I will just show you briefly two images. We have some more reconstructed crucibles from other sites. It's Hellenistic. On the top, it's from Roman sites of Cuma, Leternum, and Puteoli. And down you see the Memphis. So it's calcareous pottery. It's not simply pottery. Sometimes it has a lime-rich layer applied slip, if I can call it slip. So that all should be investigated. Also from Memphis. You see what I'm talking about. You see different layers of different kinds of clay. Why? That's the big question. And if we have this is the annual conference, right? So next conference, I will tell you much more in detail why. So yeah, and then the first analysis will require 7 years of photography, and of course, a lot of productions of both Egyptian blue and crucibles. So I would like to acknowledge people who helped me, my co-authors, my scientific advisor, Lisa Ian, Marie Kumitu, and you all for your attention.
Thanks, Ilya. We can be sure to ask you about those crucibles during the Q&A. I feel like you probably have a bit more to say. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is going to be Semiramis Sofra from the Cappadocian University of Athens. Semiramis, are you here with us?
Hello, I'm here.
Go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, you see?
We don't see the full screen version right now.
Wait a second. Okay, maybe now it's good. No?
Nope. We're still seeing.
Okay, wait. Just give me 1 second to fix it, maybe.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, now.
Yes, perfect.
And you can see while I change the slides, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, it looks good.
great. Well, thank you very much for having me here and for the organization committee. My topic is the economic centers of East Crete through the study of utilitarian pottery during Neopalatial period. And in this study is going to examine the production and distribution of utilitarian pottery and in which degree this affects the economy during Neopalatial period in East Crete. For that reason, we are going to quote studies of petrographic analysis and also macroscopic observations in order to understand better this category of pottery production, which for many reasons is not known or studied well. Big and well-published sites of East Crete are chosen to be presented. Economic models are consisted of 3 components: production, distribution, and consumption. Exchange networks usually are in big regions, whilst the activities of production are local. It is considered that pottery could be transferred in big quantities despite the existence of local production in regions which take part in an exchange network. For instance, in Mycenaean period, but also in modern pottery tradition, it is proved that there are centers of ceramic production which they exported their ceramics not based on their content, but due to their fabric, which made them suitable for a particular use. More specifically, during the Mycenaean period, the cooking vessels of Aegina were exported due to their very good quality and resistance to heat. In the same site in modern times, we find the jugs, kanatia, particularly popular for maintaining the temperature of liquids and for storing goods. At this project, the problems that occurred were the absence of utilitarian pottery, few petrographic analysis done, the chronological problem of Neopalatial period, and as for the utilitarian pottery, the term does not always clarify whether this includes courseware pottery or it refers only to the undecorated pottery. It should not be forgotten that a lot of courseware pottery pots, which seems to be undecorated macroscopically, it is possible that they originally had some decoration, which now is not visible. It is also common that the exterior surface of courseware pottery pots has not been treated with any kind of polishing, although a sleeve is often used. Sometimes, if the decoration of the surface of the pottery pots applied after firing, then this is quite delicate in relation to other factors such as taphonomy, post-excavation treatment of the findings, etc. As for the problem of Neopalatial period, in our case, is defined the period between Middle Minoan 3 to Late Minoan 1b. Researchers have divided Crete into 5 or 6 peripheries. As for the East Crete, there are the territories of Petras, Makrigelos Diaskari, and Zakros Palekastro. Some of the researchers make a further division into East Central Crete and East Crete. During pre-Palatial times, East Crete was influenced by Mallia. For Neopalatial period, the geological environment is the phyllite tempered fabrics and granodiorite tempered fabrics. Through petrographic analysis of samples of the region, 10 or 12 different ceramic fabrics are recognized, some of which are produced locally and some others are imports from Central Crete or elsewhere. Principal scholar of this investigation is Peter Day, who has analyzed samples from several sites of the City region. After these results, We have 3 sites of pottery production and 3 categories of pottery pots that produced there. We need to clarify that the fabric from cooking pots of Κλιμματαριά looks like the amphorae from Achladia. Moreover, samples of pithos and amphora from Petras, such as pots from Riza and Platiskino, show some similarities to their fabric. Nevertheless, they are classified sometimes in 2 different categories, consisting also 2 different centers of production. One more thing to note is that the clay source at Achladia could not be used itself because this particular clay is not suitable in manufacturing pottery pots. Looking at this plate, we may observe the below. Although specific production centers are identified, it is accepted that there are various overlaps in the composition of the clays of the vessels, which come from different places in the region. Researchers admit that the area has various phyllite sources, so it is difficult to identify specific production centers. However, it is possible that different ceramic workshops exist under the supervision of one and only center. In that case, it should be explained in which way pots with the same ceramic fabric are found at the sphere of 2 different production centers. It is possible few centers which produce pottery in big quantities and are occupied in the region, they might supervise or undertake the production of the products of the smaller centers. Samples from Akrigialos, Diaskari, and Καλό Νερό showed that the fabric of those is the same and the production center might be in the coastal valley of Makrigialos. Also, studies in Pithoi have showed that these vessels produced locally in Mochlos, Zakros, Petras, and Palekastro. In addition, samples of Pithoi and other storage vessels from Chochlakes and Azokeramo indicate similar ceramic fabric to Palekastro and Zakros. It should also note that Palekastro, Epano Zakros, and Kato Zakros were distributing oval-mouthed amphorae to the central Crete. Overall, pottery pots and their contents, as well as styles and ideas, seems to be easily distributed amongst short or long-distant areas. Concerning Zakros, it is influenced by Knossos during the Neopalastial period. We observe similarities to pottery, although Zakros maintains its local character. According to petrographic studies, the results of which are in press, during Middle Minoan 3A to Late Minoan 1A period in Zakros, the ceramic production for the utilitarian pottery was mostly local, and the production is of at least one local ceramic workshop. Same picture we have during Late Minoan 2 to Late Minoan 3 period. However, we have clay coming from other regions. One of those might be the Mirabello area. Pottery found in Palekastro and Zakros has common stylistic features, and these similarities might show the existence of a shared workshop in the region, as Platon argued. Also, there are some few pottery imports from Knossos during Late Minoan 1A period. Epano and Kato Zakros seems to have similar fabric. One more important thing, as studies exhibit, is that fabric from Palekastro and Zakros seems to be different. The fabric of these 2 sites is not similar to other fabrics of East Crete. This strengthens the view that we may have at least one center of production in this region. We have few indications of installations of ceramic production or kilns so far in East Crete. Based on petrographic studies, local storage vessels seems they are produced by many and various fabrics which were possibly used in different workshops. After petrographic analysis from Middle Minoan 3 to Late Minoan 1, material from House X of Komos, it is clear that the majority of the imports of fine and coarseware decorated pottery come from Knossos, whilst some of them are from East Crete. It is observed that Mochlos does not have Knossian imports, even if these are common in Psira. Studies of microscopic and macroscopic observations show similarities between the local Mochlos clay and the coarse phyllite fabric of Mournia, as well as between local Mochlos clay and dark phyllite fabric of Kavousi, that is also found in Mournia and Psira. This recipe is common in the area among the sites of Kavousi, Psira, Gournia, and Mochlos from Neopalacial period to Iron Age. Researchers have concluded that it is possible that these sites represent only one center of production, which had the same pursuit in its commercial trade of this region and other distant sites. Accordingly, it is impossible to distinguish the locality of Mochlos pottery, as it has similarities in fabric to pottery pots from other workshops in Mirabello area. Psira has applied almost all of its pottery from neighboring areas of Crete, including Gournia. During late Minoan I period, it was a significant commercial site in Mirabello Bay. During late Minoan IB, Psira imports pottery pots from distant areas in and out of the island, and it is considered to be among the port stations for overseas trade. Fabrics found in Gournia and Psira are common in the surrounding area. Based on the studies, Psira imports courseware pottery from at least two regions, Zakros and Mochlos. Kavousi trades pottery from Mirabello area and the north of Isthmus of Hierapetra. In Neopalacial period, we may find courseware ceramics from Kavousi to Psira and Mochlos in a variety of utilitarian pottery pots. Fabric of courseware ceramic from Palekastro is local, and we can find it in tableware. It has also similarities to the fabric from Vouvakefali, Kastri, and Krusolako. Recent studies from Palekastro shows that the biggest part of the clay beds used in early to late Bronze Age are located inside Pylos. Despite the fact that the majority of the fabric that was found is local, some fabrics that were found in Building 1 are not local. Palekastro has also imported pottery from West Messara or Knossos. Imports from Knossos area are found in the ceramic material at wells 575 and 605 in area 6 of the settlement. In the early Neopalacial period, the majority of imports from several sites of Palekastro are coming possibly from central Crete, and one example might be from Zakros. In several other trenches, imports of pottery has not been found, while in southwest building, we have an import from Zakros. Last but not least, there are some sites in East Crete which got their pottery from Palekastro. Petras uses local fabric for pottery production, which can be also found in other sites in this area. Comparisons in pottery from Knossos can be made. I'm sorry. Can be made. There are also similarities macroscopically and microscopically in pottery from Knossos, from Palekastro. Petrographic analysis shows that fabric from Petras has been used in Mochlos and Palekastro, and there are similarities to Komos too. In addition, according to the typology of cooking pots from Petras, a new local type indicates that there was a local workshop. Through the most recent petrographic studies in Petras, 2021, it is clear that there are also pots imported from Palekastro, Mirabello area, Zakros, and Makrigelos. These studies showed two local fabric groups. One, it is consisted by phyllite quartzite series, and another from dark phyllite inclusions. Both of them can be parallelized to the fabric from Sitia region or Achladia. For Nodaru, local pottery of Petras is defined to include the entire area of the Bay of Sitia and the Valley of Achladia. A plausible conclusion. As a result, it has been confirmed through bibliography that all sites produce, in some degree, their own local pottery, but the boundaries of each of them are not clear and in most cases cannot be detected. Also, there is abundance of imported pottery from Mirabello area to all the East Cretan sites. Last but not least, Mochlos imports pottery from all the regions, while Palekastro and Komos imports pottery from specific sites. It is clear, though, that there was a variety of workshops which produced specific categories of pottery. On the contrary, it is not clear yet if they were economically under control of a bigger settlement, palace or center, and if they were working under specific orders, palatial trends, or something else. The site which exports pottery to all the sites of its grid is Knossos. This fact confirms its dominant character. On the other hand, the minor distribution centers are Psira and Kavousi. Mochlos, Kavousi, and Psira, though, are considered to be an economic unity, and in most cases, Mochlos and Kavousi are studied together. Sites which import pottery are Mochlos, Petras, Gournia, and then Palekastro and Komos. We should not forget that these are the most investigated sites. Moreover, it seems that all sites trade transport storage vessels or the goods which are stored in them. These imports come from regions that are in different distance. Nevertheless, it is possible to observe specific groups of pottery pots which is exported from one site to others. The centers of production are possible to produce and distribute their products, albeit this matter requires further investigation. We need to investigate whether some of the production centers might be middle stations for the commercial trade. However, it is quite possible that palaces must have under their control a lot of smaller workshops, as their needs could not be met by a single center. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sofra, and we'll do Q&A after. Our next speaker is going to be Ani Heblegathian from the University of Geneva. Ani, are you here? You can turn on your microphone and we can test your presentation. Hi, Ani.
Thank you very much for organizing. I will switch this. I will share my screen.
Yeah. Do you have permission?
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry. Can you see?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, thank you for organizing and giving me the chance to present and discuss with you maybe about lamps. So I've been working on terracotta lamps from Antioch and the Orontes. And while comparing, I've been comparing always for talks with the Byzantine and Roman period. This time I wanted to shed light more on the Hellenistic period lamps. So there are tools of daily life that were made at the beginning, wheel made and then mold made. So my PhD is about the lamps that were discovered in the 30s at the site of Antioch and Orontes and the suburbs of Daphne and Seleucia Pieria. The excavations were mainly published, the reports. And then recently, all the materials the archives were accessible online, are accessible online. During a visit at the Princeton University Art Museum, I could study the lamps which were and at their collection, which come from excavations. My objective was to study the lamps by context. Therefore, I just selected the lamps having a reference. So by going through the archives and the documentation, I had about 700 lamps by context, and now I'm comparing with parallels. My PhD is about to study the beginning of Christianity by the lamps. But for this talk, I'm comparing the Hellenistic period lamps of Antioch with their parallels from Cyprus. So these lamps of Antioch were first studied, the first season of study were studied by Wage, who was part of the mission. He first made them in basic groups: Greek, Hellenistic, Roman, and early Byzantine. At the end of the excavation, he made typological study and published in the 3rd volume in 41. Then we have only so far mainly studies of typology by Bronier for the lamps from Corinth, also from the Agora of Athens by Holland. And we have also publications by museums. The biggest, the most biggest reference is the one of Bailey from the British Museum. Recently, there is the one of Metropolitan Museum, the collection of Cypriot lamps, and also the Getty Museum, and other museums also published. So for this, we have 3 types of lamps from Antioch, which have parallels in Cyprus. There are the types Wage 13, Wage 19A, and Wage 21. So for Wage 13, Wage made them on 4 main groups because of the shape is the same. They don't have handle. The body is circular and the nozzle is long and the end is round. And they were thin, so we have a lot of fragments normally. And there were 4 types debates on the decoration. And the C has a handle as a thumb as S, the form of S on its right. So this type was found a lot in Delos. Therefore, Bruno suggested them to be called Delphi form. He had 728 from the excavations of Delos. And also they were found a lot in Beirut excavations. So Frangia suggested them to be Phoenician. We have also from Cyprus, from the excavations of Neopaphos, recent studies been made also on the fabrics and published by Katzer. So they found in the area of the house of Dionysos, Orpheus, at the theater and the Fabrica Hill. And we see a lot on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean from different sites like Sidon, Byblos, Arca, Jable, and the 3 sites that we see now by context in Antioch excavations. So from Antioch, we have from Bad Sea. There were 3 types, 3 examples. But as I mentioned, my study is based on the ones that I could find the context. And there were many fragments also, which the context is not easy to identify. And from the Daphne were excavations of fresco excavations because they were finding a lot of mosaics. So each time they were going to collect the mosaic and they could find lamps. So they come from 2 main sectors, Daphne 2324N and Daphne 280. And the most of the Hellenistic period lamps come from the Seleucia Pieria district, which is the Portal district, because later it was abandoned. But unfortunately, the excavations there started at the end of the mission because they excavated in this region from 32 to 39. And because of the beginning of Second World War, they stopped the project. And Seleucia, they got the permission only the last 2 years because mainly they were excavating 37 and 38. But it was promising site, and most of the Hellenistic period lamps come from this site. So we got 2 examples from House of Cilicia and the House 3, 2 examples. Now the second type of lamps, 2 types that are categorized as imitation of Ephesian lamps. Ephesian lamps, as we see on the left, were very common in the Hellenistic period, and they were famous for this dark color, which is due of the procedure of production, firing. So we have the imitation types Wage 19A and Wage 21 from Antioch. So these were common mainly in the publications that I saw so far on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, from Tarsus, and at the Cyprus Museum, there is one example. Also from Rasbasit, at the Istanbul Museum, there are some, and from Beirut and Jableh, they have handles and decorations are vegetal. And they date to the 1st century BC in Antioch. The dating varies from site to site, and because of the lack of contextualized studies, sometimes we will see later the dating varies very much. So having more examples from other sites and to compare by context will help also to have more precise dating. So the second one is the 21, which has a canal on the hand, on the nozzle, and we have them also from Beirut, Jableh, and Sugma, and Tarsus, and there are 2 examples at the Cyprus Museum. So in the middle, we see the main Ephesus type lamp that I couldn't see in the collection that what I was studying, but in the object cards coming from Antioch, and Wage categorized them Wage 20A. So for the context in Seleucia Pieria, these types come only from the Seleucia Pieria. I couldn't see any example from the collection that I collected. I studied from in Antioch or Daphne. In Seleucia Pieria, they come from the funerary grotto, the sector 17E. This one shirt and these 3 lamps. And also from the house of Dionysus and Arian, the Wage 19A and Wage 21. And also from the house of Forticus, the Wage 21. And from house 3, from Seleucia Pieria. So here we see the excavated sites in black and red, and the sectors and in yellow. And we see the types that these types of lamps which come from the sector funerary grotto, the house of Dionysus, house 3, and house of Porticus. There is this type of lamp which was very, very common in the excavations of Antioch. They are by Wage, they are studied and categorized 24C, 25. So they were all common even in Switzerland, Vindonissa. They were discovered in Carthage, in Greece, but so far I couldn't see any example published coming from Cyprus. And as you see, the dating varies from the 3rd century BC until 2nd century AD. I'm very curious to know if any one of you saw or it's published or you saw during the excavations. And I would like to know if there are raw data or to publish, because it's interesting to see. We see the how it's the geographically, and Cyprus is missing, so that's a big question. And thank you very much. So I had more questions than answers.
Thank you so much, Ani.
Thank
And
you.
we'll talk to you again shortly after our next presentation. Nowen Godot. Are you here, Nowen? Hi.
Hi. Good morning. I think I can already share my screen.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, can you see it?
We can.
And when I move, you see the next slide, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you. Thank you to be here. And thank you to invite me to talk today about the material culture in Ottoman Cyprus. So I will mostly focus today on the tobacco consumption and actually so the smoking pipes. I will first talk a little bit about tobacco. So the tobacco cultivation began in South America in the 5th millennium BC. The earliest evidence that we have of tobacco in the Ottoman Empire is in Istanbul. It dates back to 1576. Tobacco was introduced by English or Portuguese sailors in Turkey or in the Levant around the early 17th century. Tobacco was not at the beginning a commodity for every people, but it was reserved for an elite, and its consumption was initially most medicinal, and after it became an addiction as we know it now. So the tobacco consumption and production has very complicated story, and it was very soon banned by Sultan Ahmed I and then prohibited by the religious authority of Mecca, who considers that people were not concentrated enough on their work and they were just smoking all the time. It has been also punished by death by Sultan Murad IV in 1633. But then, few years later, in 1646, a new decree by Sultan Ibrahim officially authorized the consumption of tobacco and the production also. So it was combining it with taxation of import and export for the producer and for the merchant. And thereafter, like a religious legalization around 1720 by a fatwa issued by the Mufti of Damascus. So from the mid-17th century onward, this new consumption spread rapidly in the public space, but also in the cafe, where the men drink coffee, this new beverage coming from Yemen. And the cafe, so the place, were a new place of socialization. Before the creation, the Ottoman men had few places to develop their social life, except in the family sphere and except also at the mosque. So the cafe were little appreciated by the imperial authority, and it seems because it seems to have been a place for propagation of rumor and meeting, organizing revolts. So they try always to close the cafe. This engraving from 1836, Nigerian woman was smoking indoors. So it's somewhat, of course, a kind of orientalist representation of this woman. But what I want to say is that everyone was smoking. So men, women, children. So the men mostly everywhere and the women at home. The Ottoman period in Cyprus is well known from historical source. It is the period where there is the most written documentation, but the archaeological data are very little known and studied. So the history of Cyprus, the Ottoman Cyprus, it has been conquered by the Ottoman in 1571 until 1878, and the British influence and the independence in the 60s. So the Ottoman heritage is not necessarily the period that is most highlighted for archaeologists working in Cyprus. Little research has been done, apart of course the impressive work of Michael Given, particularly in the Ottoman landscape, in the islands, the agriculture, the settlements, and also Uzi Baram, who worked a lot on the material culture, but there is not that much than that. So unfortunately, because of this problem of few documentation of the Ottoman heritage, I do not really have much stratigraphic data to present, since I did the study of the pipes some months ago and I didn't get all the data for the moment. But we are talking about a set of more than 400 pipes. which are conserved in the museum in Nicosia, so archaeological museum. And the objects that I will talk about in this presentation come from different sites in the center of Nicosia. I will try to pronounce this, and I'm very sorry because my Greek is not that good. So it's the Archbishop Palace, the Eleutheria Square, Paphos Gate, Antigonus Street, Asclepios Street, and it has been excavated by Phryni Hadjichristofi, Efthymia Alphas, Chrysanthi Kounou, and Paulina Christofi, that of course I want to thank for their help. Here on this slide, I simply show you how to a pipe. So this pipe have not been found in Nicosia, just an example. First, we have the furnace or the bowl. It's mostly in clay, but we can find some of them in stone or in metal. There is a wood stem, which could be up to 2 meters for the elite, but it was usually just 20 centimeters for the normal people. We had to be put into the furnace. And finally, there is also this mousse piece made of semi-precious stone or amber, which is inserted into the wooden stem. As you can see, smoking requires a lot of preparation. So I will show you in this presentation different pipes found in Nicosia. First, I will show you some importation, and after some local production. So first here we have this production from Istanbul, coming from the district of Tophane, particularly active in the 19th century. In this district, there were many pipes makers who produce very similar pipes with this very fine ray clay. And the clay is coming from Eastern Turkey. There is also the red slip. So we can see also this globular schenken with incision on each facet. So it's very typical, and it's a real Turkish model that is very well known and much exported. So you can really find it everywhere in the Balkan, in the Levant, in Iraq, in Cyprus, in North Africa. You found it everywhere. These pipes are also were also produced in the district of Tophane. We see a more pronounced quality. The clay is more dense and with a darker red. The pattern is also very characteristic with this palmette stamp on every facet on the furnace. It can also be found in other sites throughout the empire, but less common than the ones that I showed you just before. It's also dated from the 19th century. And then there is also this pipe, which is the last example of Turkish production with this gold slip. So this type of object were particularly expensive and therefore probably belonging to a local elite. We can see that the object has been used a lot. So it was not just representative objects, but really used. So there is some trace of combustion. It's particularly rare to find this kind of object in archaeological context. They are also from the 19th century. And then this one from Nicosia that I wrote is coming from Nicosia, from archaeological context. So all this Turkish production that I say be found in Cyprus, but also almost everywhere in every Ottoman village, cities that have been excavated, shows the importance of the Turkish material culture in the local consumption, not just in Cyprus, but everywhere. And it's a kind of soft power through the material culture, as we can see, for example, in our society. So we have a lot of objects coming from Asia, for example, and we are influenced by this material culture. And this kind of parallel that we can make with the Turkish production during the Ottoman Empire. But there is other kind of importation in Cyprus. There is this Levantine pipes that have no specific, like the Turkish one, place of production, but have been found in large quantity in Palestine, in Lebanon, and in Syria. They have so this coarse gray clay with this dark purple slip. The decoration is not very different, and the shape also not very different than other type of production. That would be dated from the 18th century. So we found it mostly in Cyprus, in the Levant, few in Saudi Arabia and in Iraq. Here we can see what we call the three-load fabric. It was produced in Iraq. They are mainly made with this very relatively coarse beige clay. They have this very special surface treatment with a red slip and a light swirling paint. We don't know other similar use of bicolor slip. And this paint is found so on very different kind of shape, so we cannot really do any generalization. They are believed to be dated from the late 19th century and early 20th century, and Timothy Matney explains that they were still being bought in northern Iraq in the first half of the 20th century, so it's very late production. As far we know, except in Iraq, of course, the place of production, these pipes have been only found in Damascus, in Syria, and in Cyprus, in Nicosia. So it shows a kind of connection between Cyprus and Iraq. Very interesting than other kind of material culture, Ottoman material culture like ceramic, never have shown before. There is also this production, so the Shishman fabric. The Shishman, this name, Shishnaim, is coming from the stamps that we found often on the shanking of the pipes. So it should be actually a name, an Armenian name. And the furnace so is semicircular and straight with facet. It's almost the same shape for the shank, also globular with facet. They are also this very particular palmette stamp and incision decoration. It's not really easy to know where exactly it was produced. Since there is an Armenian name, I mean, in the Ottoman Empire, there were Armenian mostly everywhere. So we cannot really say that it comes from Armenia. It cannot be said. So publication assumes the name of Istanbul or Kütahya, but actually when we look at the place of distribution of these pipes, we found it so a lot in Western Turkey, in Edirne or Smyrna, and in the Balkans, so in Serbia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania. So it's quite interesting to see that they are not found at all in the southern and eastern part of the Ottoman Empire, so not in Iraq, not in Levant, not in Arabia or in North Africa, but also then in Cyprus. So it made also new connection. They are also from the 19th century. This production, the glaze production, they are very rare. We found other kind of glaze production for pipes in Spain or in the Balkans, but it's very, very different. And these pipes that I'm actually showing you, which have this yellow to brown glaze, are very, very similar to other very rare examples that we can find in Beirut or in Saida. So, of course, the place of production is not clear since we found 2 in Cyprus and 5 in Lebanon, so it's not really clear. I think when we make some correlation with the ceramic production, that it could come from the Levant, but of course we're not sure, and we do not have any datation for them. The last type that I want to show you for the importation is what I call the common ware. So they are pipes, often with a beige to orange medium quality clay with a shades that are rather typical, so globular or flared with for the shank hand, and for the furnace is also like semi-spherical. Most of the time, and there is not particular decoration. There is slip or there is no slip, so it's really like this productions that we cannot really say where they come from because they have been found absolutely everywhere. So exactly this same model, I found it also in Syria, in the Balkans, Saudi Arabia, in Iraq. So exactly the same. So we cannot give a place for the production and the date, of course, either is not possible. I do think that there are pipes that were produced maybe so on site, so it could be local production with mold that could have been shared by many potters. That's why that we found exactly the same shape in very, very various places. So it's enough for the imported production. We'll now talk about local production. So according to some authors, they never have been a local production of pipe in Cyprus. But from a theoretical point of view, I think it's not possible to assess something like that. So I share.
Nolan,
Yes?
sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna let you know you're at 15 minutes. So if you could just give us a brief recap of our cool Cypriot production pipes.
Okay, I think it was on time, but okay. So okay, production. Okay, I will just finish briefly. So I think there is local production everywhere. In every small village, I think that it was possible to find local production. And when I had a look on the production that I found in the pipes that I found in Cyprus. So I found this production, and I think it's a local production. So there is a beige to dark gray clay, and it's actually mostly the shape and the decoration. So there is this roulette of rectangular incision, and they are also very small. The second local production is with this biconical shank hand. We've read to also, this one mostly the same kind of clay, but this one do not have slip, and I never found actually these two productions, this one or this one, I never found it never in other place in Middle East. It's also that's why I think that it was local production. So I'm almost done, and so I show you any kind of different object, from the very expensive one with gold to the local ship. Local production. So we see that Nicosia didn't have access to every Ottoman production, but mostly with the neighbors, with the Levant, with Iraq, also with not really a neighbor. And Turkey, there is no contact with European production, North Africa or Egypt. And yeah, so I wanted to show some example of this production because pipes are very clear in the datation. We just have 3rd century, and they are very easy to study because there is mostly one shape, one clay, one place of production, and that's why that I hope that I show you how the potential of the pipes study is to understand exchange in the Ottoman Empire. Thank you, I'm done.
Thanks so much, Nolan. I think what we'll do is we'll just go in order, taking each of our speakers, questions for each of them in turn, if that's okay. So we'll start with Ilya. And I think we'll have him come up, and if people have questions in the audience here, we'll have you come up to the microphone so that the online audience can hear you okay. That sounds good. Does anyone have any questions for Ilya, whether here? Yes.
I think Ilya, it was
No, I can repeat your question.
Okay, thanks, Ilya.
I'm just wondering, at the end, you showed us these crucibles that you plan to analyze eventually. And before that, you showed the map with the distribution workshops, actually production sites and workshops. So I'm wondering where do your samples coming from? Are you going to sample from all these places? If you can tell us something about that.
Okay, I will repeat for the online audience. First, Elena said that she liked my presentation. very important. But yes, she asked a very good question about the sampling. Where will the samples for further analysis will come? Will they come from the production sites that were shown on the map, and so on? So yeah, thank you for the question. I'll try to elaborate that. Well, first of all, why those sites on the map are marked as production sites? Well, basically because of the presence of the crucible, because it's served as the main marker, and because it's the first, actually the only kind of material that survives that directly reflects the production process. But not always, because for example, in the course, they don't have crucibles yet, but we identified it as a production site because they had lots and lots, hundreds of unsuccessfully produced pellets. So this it wouldn't travel, it wouldn't betray that marks. So coming back to the question, for my PhD, I will sample crucibles from Kantir and from Amarna. Those are the late Bronze Age sites in Egypt, and from Memphis, which is Hellenistic. So we cannot sample from Kos because there are no crucibles. We will not sample from Bay of Naples because it's on one side and completely different situation. Why will we limit ourselves to Egyptian sites? Because that, I think, will help to understand the development of the technology in the same region. Because Amarna, Kantir, and Memphis more or less in the same region of Egypt. They have the same availability of raw materials and everything, but there are different crucibles and there are different recipes of Egyptian glue. So it would be easier to understand why it developed. Because if we see something different on the other side of the globe, right? For example, in this course, well, we understand it's different because probably they didn't have the access to the raw materials that they had in Egypt.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ilya. Are there any other questions in the audience or online? Yes, there was.
Thank you, Ilya, for the wonderful presentation. I'm just going to ask you one question that's coming out of big currency. You said a lot of things about Egyptian blue, but my main question is like, how can we see the deterioration of Egyptian blue? Because it was used in wall paintings, sculptures, and everything. And my main question is why people prefer to use that color instead of a pigment, instead of a mineral-based pigment, just like last say.
Thanks you for the question. I will repeat for the online audience. They are basically asked what was the deterioration process of Egyptian glue as the material, and why people had an urge to develop this material. Why did they use Egyptian glue? Why did they prefer sometimes over the natural occurring mineral pigments? Which is a good question, and I usually include this part in my presentation, but we have very time limit. Well, first of all, Egyptian glue is considered quite a stable pigment. It basically do not deteriorate that much per se. The Egyptian glue itself doesn't deteriorate. If the batch composition was not perfect, there were excess of several components which were not reacting. For example, there were too much copper or something, so it didn't turn into chloride, which is Egyptian glue mineralizing, but it stayed as the copper oxide or something. Yes, it can be darkened a little bit, it can turn, but in comparison to other things, it's pretty stable. And answering the second part of your question, why did they develop this pigment and why did it sometimes have the upper hand? It's also quite understandable because what were the other options? The azurite, a mineral pigment, and the lapis lazuli. Well, with the lapis lazuli, it's quite obvious. Where does it come from? It comes from Afghanistan, so you need lots of blue stuff. You cannot have caravans from Afghanistan. It makes it very unreliable source of supply and makes it extremely expensive. Well, I don't remember particularly who was the scholar, but I think it was Mark Tite who calculated the amount of Egyptian blue needed to cover just one tomb, and it was like almost a ton. So you cannot have that much lapis lazuli, right? It won't be reasonable. Okay, you have azurite, which is, yeah, it's more available, it's good, it's bright blue, but it's unstable because it's slowly but steadily weathering to malachite, it turns green, because it's a copper-based mineral. And that's the thing about Egyptians, because if we think about the pyramids and everything, what's the most intrinsic feature of the pyramids? Why did they make the pyramids? Because it's eternal, it stays. We have it after thousands and thousands of years, right? So for Egyptians, they wanted to preserve things as they were. So azurite would be a good choice because it would turn green.
You know why I'm asking? Because, okay, I know nothing about it, but I've read some articles about the use of Egyptian blue, wall paintings, or sculptures that you never found, but traces of it and find it instrument that happens. And if you found it, you found it in a really weird purplish hue instead of blue. But then they have analysis and they say this is why I'm asking about the theory, because most likely it has to be about the production systems or different ways of doing it. I don't know.
Okay, Theo a little bit elaborated. He asked because he occurred in the papers that sometimes the Egyptian blue found in the areas that are not necessarily blue, and is it because of the deterioration? Well, the answer in most cases no, because it's just part of polychromy when you use several colors to achieve, for example, to provide the background, to do some shades, or for example, I mean, I'm not doing that stuff, but from the conference I mentioned that sometimes the brows, the eyes, they mark it with Egyptian blue. It's not blue, it doesn't appear blue, but they use it in the mixture with other components. Those components get washed away, and yeah, it's here. And also, because you said that sometimes it's purple. Well, if it's purple, that it can be just Egyptian blue, because as I showed in the internal diagram, there is a high variety of colors. You can do it differently.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ilya. I think we have time for a quick question.
Okay, it's very quick. It's more curiosity. Are you going to actually analyze some like frescoes or tombs to see the product after its use? So which kind of like mediums it was used with, and if there were some varnishes they were using more than others to avoid alteration of the color due to chemical reactions.
Okay, we have a quick question, and I hope I will give a quick answer because the question is quite broad. Paul basically asked that, am I going to analyze the finished project, the paint layers containing Egyptian blue, varnishes, and all accompanying stuff? Well, I would put it very briefly, no, because first of all, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of case studies on Egyptian blue implementation who discuss exactly that, and those people are more expert than I am currently. But it's been done quite extensively. There is big literature on that. If it's just for curiosity, I can say that sometimes it was applied with the Gamma Arabic, but usually it applied in bone fresco, just with the calcite. Yeah, so yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ilya. And if anyone here has questions, you can ask Ilya during coffee break. I have a couple still. But let's move on to Sofra's paper. Sofra, you can unmute yourself and come back.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi again.
Does anyone here in the audience have a question for Sofra? Or anyone in the online chat? We haven't seen you guys as much, but I know it can be a little awkward to feel out of place online. If no one has a question to start, one quick technical question. Maybe I misunderstood you or just don't know enough about pottery. You had said that at Archaeology, maybe the cooking pots, something about the clay from there maybe made them unsuitable for manufacture. Is that what you were saying? Or did I just misunderstand you completely?
No, I said that the pottery, that the clay, the fabric from Archaeology is not very suitable to use it alone for pottery production.
Thanks for clarifying. And what is the feature of the clay that makes it unsuitable in that way?
No, they have to use it with in combination with other fabrics, because alone it's not suitable to make a pottery, to make a pot.
Awesome, thanks. That's so interesting. Anyone from the audience, either online? I I think sometimes East Crete can feel a little specific, you know? If you haven't studied there, it's a lot of sites. But I really liked how your presentation talked about, you know, what's the palatial dynamic going on and if there's multiple workshops and how they may or may
Thank
not
you.
be related to one another. Yeah, it was great. I guess I'll ask one last question if everyone's okay with that.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. You had started off at the beginning. I think it's sort of the famous example of the egg and eaten cooking pots, which have these great material features that allow for them to be like heated at nice temperatures. Can you tell from East Crete if any of the fabrics that you're looking at or the ones that you see exported, if they have special utilitarian features?
Can you tell me again the question? Sorry.
Yeah. Are there any features that you're able to observe in the composition of the pottery from any of the East Cretan sites that you've looked at that you think makes it especially useful or that would make it better than another type of clay?
Well, I don't know yet, and I'm not able to answer this question because the studies, the material that I used for my presentation was based on the petrographic analysis and studies from other researchers. So I'm not very sure to answer that.
That's totally okay. Thanks so much, Sofra.
Thank you too.
If no one else has any questions, we will go on to the next paper, to Ani. Ani, if you could, yeah, thank you.
Yes, hello again.
Okay, anyone online with a question for Ani or here? Okay, if no one here has a question yet, I'll start. I was curious about the typology. I know nothing about the period or the lamps. It sounded like the typology was more about shape.
Yes.
Why is that? And does decoration fit into
Unfortunately, they started by typology, the beginning of studies of lamps, and the tradition goes on. So normally they are very various. There are so types, but probably now they should be updated because normally, for example, to the late Byzantine period and early Ottoman period, they are mixed Wagi 56, which is very, and yeah, they should be more studies. So that's why contextualized studies will help, because before they used to study like the pottery typology without context and tack. So hoping in the future with more context, it will be more specified.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any features of the lamps that you think are maybe the way forward in typology, or, you know, if you could invent things?
There are like specific typology. The Roman types are more, the discus is more circular. I didn't show maybe in the, and they have more decorations. So the typology, the shape, the morphology changed by period, but there are details that they can tell a lot, but we need more quantitative and qualitative data and analysis, and the pottery analysis, archaeometry, which is not now very common for Antioch. One person did in the 77 for the Roman type of lamps, not the Hellenistic. So more detailed studies will bring more answers.
That's exciting, thanks. We have a question from the chat. What was the impact from David Snook? Thanks, David. What was the impact of using molds for making the clay lamps, he asks. And then a second part to his question, and does this affect the typology?
Yes, the mold, yeah, because before it was more wheel-made round. They started by mold, but later, late Byzantine and early Ottoman period, they came back to wheel-made and the glaze. So it's changed to have more molds and decorations. This is what was the impact. The mold was more helping for the in relief decorations. But they also used, for example, for Wagi 7, the type, they used to make wheel-made and then put on the decoration and they cook. So, but for a long period, they were used the mold-made lamps. From the Hellenistic to Roman is only mold-made, as far as I know.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. It looks like Panayotis Theophanous. You can either unmute yourself or type in your question. Oh, it was the cursor. Womp womp. Sorry, Panayoti. Yes, they are.
I don't have a question, it's more of a comment, because she said about other types of gold. I know that the person from the University of Athens now is studying lamps from the same context from a lecture lamp in Crete. So
Ani, are you hearing any of that? Or should I-
Not well. Please, if you can repeat the question.
sorry, it's not a question, it's more of a comment, because you
Yes.
said that you need more study about that. I know a person at the University of Athens now is dealing with lamps from a
Yes.
lecture in Crete. And
Okay.
Crete and Cyprus, they might be interesting to compare.
Okay, thank you. And
Yep.
myself, I have a question to the next speaker, Nolan.
Great. Let's
Maybe
officially
you switch and I
Yes.
come back. Okay.
transition time. Dun, dun, dun. All right, Ani, go for it.
Okay, thank you. I
Yeah, Ani, you can go ahead and ask your question. I think it's
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. It was interesting. I have question about the Armenian writing on the pipes, if you could read it, or if you, because she said there are pipes with Armenian writing. So if it was possible to read, or if she needs help, because normally there were families which were famous from one city and they were producing ceramics. So when reading and knowing the name, it can be helpful. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you, thank you. There is some Armenian stamp on pipes, and yes, I do not read Armenian at all.
I could read for you if you want.
Thank you, thank you so much. Well, if I found some, I will ask you. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
That's great. This is why we do conferences, right? Connections. Does anyone have any questions from the one in the audience here or online? Yes, Maria, and then Kyriaki after. I think it's better, yep.
Hi, Nolwenn. It was lovely to
Hi,
see you.
Ryan.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question about local limitations. Were you able to identify any local limitations of products coming from the big production centers in Cyprus? Thank you.
Yes, so it could have some imitation. I'm not quite sure for Cyprus. Of course, there is some place which we know exactly that there were local imitation of big center of production like Top Hane. We know, like in Marseille, that they were really producing Top Hane pipes, but in Marseille. In Cyprus, I mean, I still need to think about that, since we have some Top Hane pipes, as you know, since you are working with me, some Top Hane pipes that are with this very clay a bit different, and the quality is a bit different. So it's something, of course, that I think about, but I do really not have for the moment real answer to say it's a local limitation that I cannot.
Thanks, Nolan. I think we'll take the question from Kyriaki and then Antula Vasiliades will go next.
Yeah, hello, good morning. I have a question about the good type that they usually use for creating the stems of the pipes, if you have an idea.
Can you, what kind of?
The type of the wood.
The type of the wood?
Yeah. Make the stems.
Yeah, it's actually a very good idea, because I don't have any answer. No, and I never actually read about that. I never read anything about the type of wood that was used to make the stamp. I know that there is an article, but I don't remember from whom, and it was in Turkish, so I tried to read, but it was not that good. And it was talking about a pipe maker in Istanbul still doing pipes, and maybe in this article there is answer, but I do not remember at all.
Awesome, thanks. And a question from the chat from Anthula. She's asking if you were able to look at pipes from outside of Nicosia, or right now is it just Nicosia?
So when I went to make this project in Nicosia, I just had the opportunity to work in Nicosia. I know that there is other pipes in other places, of course. There is pipes everywhere, and I really would love to also go to other city, because maybe we can have, I mean, other information, because it was very interesting to see these two local. Oh, you have some pipes. Well, I will be very happy. I think I'm coming back soon in Cyprus. So if you want, you can send. I can send you an email if you want. You can as you want. Because yes, it will be, of course, very interesting to have more information about what is happening in the island.
Awesome. Okay, I think unless anyone has a last question, we can say, oh, there's Antula's email. Hi, Antula. Thank you guys for great presentations and great question and answer. And let us drink some coffee.
Hey.